Hi everyone, welcome to Emma, a true infidelity story. I'm excited to share a new story with you. The summer sun hung low over our suburban haven, casting long shadows across the freshly cut lawn. I was out in the garden, my hands buried in the warm soil when I felt it, a restlessness stirring within me, like the first whispers of an autumn breeze. My life with Jack, our cozy home, our loyal cute dog King. It was all so perfect. Yet there was this yearning for something more, something wild and untamed. As I knelt there, a figure appeared at the edge of our property, silhouetted against the setting sun. My heart skipped a beat, not with fear, but with a sudden, inexplicable recognition. What if the life I've always known was about to change forever? The summer of 1979 was like a warm blanket wrapped around our little suburban home. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the relentless song of cicadas, creating an atmosphere that was both comforting and suffocating. My name is Luna and I'm in my late 21s with a life that many would describe as idyllic. I tend to my garden with a passion that borders on obsession, finding solace in the earth, the plants, and the predictable cycle of growth and decay. My husband Jack is the kind of man who carries the weight of the world with a smile. He works at the local factory, coming home each evening with stories of the day's trials and triumphs. His voice, rough from the day's labor, fills our home with a sense of routine and stability. We've been married for 5 years, and in that time we've built a life that's good, predictable, comforting. And then there's King, our German Shepherd. He's not just a cute dog, his family from the moment we brought him home as a tiny, wriggling pup. He's been by my side, his loyalty unwavering. Jack often teases that King is more my husband than he is, and there's truth in that. Just King follows me around his tail, wagging with a rhythm that matches my heartbeat. His presence is a constant reminder of the love and simplicity that fills our home. Yet beneath this veneer of perfection there's a restlessness in me, a yearning for something more, something different. It's not that I'm ungrateful for what I have, far from it. But sometimes when I'm alone in the garden, my hands deep in the soil, I find myself dreaming of other lives, other possibilities. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jack came home with a new story. But this time it wasn't about the factory or his colleagues. He spoke of a man he met, a traveler with tales of distant lands and adventures that made my heart race with a mix of envy and excitement. He talked about places where the sun sets over oceans, not just suburban lawns. Jack set his eyes alight with a spark I hadn't seen before. And there are mountains. Lunar mountains that touch the sky. I listened, my heart pounding in my C********. The thought of such vastness, such freedom was intoxicating. As Jack continued, I could feel the walls of our home closing in, the routine of our life suddenly feeling like a cage. That night, after Jack had fallen asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. King, sensing my unease, nuzzled his head under my arm, his warm breath, a comfort in the darkness. I whispered to him, "Do you ever feel like there's something out there, King? Something we're missing?" The next morning, the restlessness was still there, simmering beneath the surface. I went through the motions of my day, but my mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts of distant horizons. While watering the roses, I caught myself imagining what it would be like to leave, to explore, to live a life less ordinary. As the days turned into weeks, my restlessness grew. It wasn't just about the stories Jack brought home. It was about the realization that life could be more than what I had known. I began to see our home not as a sanctuary, but as a starting point, a place from which one could venture out into the world. One afternoon, while Jack was at work, I found myself in the attic, rummaging through old boxes among the relics of our past. I discovered a map, yellowed with age, of places I had only ever read about in books. My fingers traced the lines, the contours of mountains, the curves of rivers. It was then that the idea, once a whisper, became a shout. Could I leave? Could I break away from this life, from Jack? From the predictability that had once been my comfort? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As I sat there, the map spread out before me, King, at my feet. I realized that my restlessness wasn't just a fleeting emotion. It was a call to action, a call to explore, to live, to find out what lay beyond the confines of our suburban existence. And so, with a heart full of both fear and anticipation, I began to plan not just for vacation or a brief escape, but for a journey that might redefine who I was, who we were. Because deep down, I knew that if I didn't follow this path, this unexpected path, I might never forgive myself for not trying. One evening after a particularly long day, Jack comes home late, his face etched with exhaustion. He barely touches his dinner, and after a brief conversation about his day, he retires to bed early. I'm left alone in the living room, the silence of the house pressing in on me. King, sensing my mood, rests his head on my lap, his eyes full of concern. I decide to take King for a walk to clear my mind. The night is cool and the streetlights cast long shadows. As we walk, King is unusually playful, darting after fireflies and rolling in the grass. His joy is infectious, and for a moment I forget my loneliness. As we return home, I notice how King's affection has grown more intense lately. He's always been affectionate, but now there's an eagerness in his behavior that I can't quite place. The next day I watch King closely, trying to understand this new intensity. He seems to be on high alert, his ears perked up at every sound, his tail wagging with a fervor that's almost desperate. It's as if he's trying to communicate something, his eyes searching mine for some kind of understanding. I remember the stories Jack told me about his work, about the people he met. There was one tale in particular, about a man who had a cute dog that could sense when its owner was in danger. Could King be picking up on something I'm not seeing? That evening, as Jack comes home, I decide to broach the subject. Jack, I start as he settles into his favorite chair. Have you noticed anything different about King lately? Jack looks up from his newspaper, his eyes tired but attentive. Different how he's been acting, more protective, more alert. It's like he's trying to tell us something. Jack thinks for a moment, his brow furrowing. Well, cute dogs can sense things, you know. Maybe he's just picking up on your restlessness, your desire for something more. I now considering his words, but there's something more to it. I can feel it. That night, after Jack falls asleep, I lay in bed, my thoughts racing. King, as if on CU, jumps up beside me, his body pressed against mine. His warmth is comforting, yet his presence feels like a silent plea for attention. The following morning, I decide to take King to the vet, just to make sure there's nothing physically wrong with him. Dr. Harris ARV listens patiently as I describe King's behavior after a thorough checkup. He concludes, physically, King is in perfect health, but animals, especially cute dogs like King, can be very intuitive. They sense changes in their environment, in their owner's moods, even in the atmosphere. As we leave the vet's office, I feel a mix of relief and confusion. King's behavior isn't due to illness, but what, then? Back home I sit in the garden, the map from the attic spread out on the table beside me. King lies at my feet, his head resting on my shoes. I trace the lines of the map with my finger, my mind wandering to the places I've only ever imagined. Suddenly King's ears perk up and he lets out a low, rumbling growl. I look around expecting to see something, but there's nothing out of the ordinary. Yet King's reaction is unmistakable. He's not just protective, he's warning me of something. That night, as I prepare dinner, King's behavior escalates. He paces around the kitchen, his tail stiff, his eyes darting to the windows. I try to soothe him, but he remains on edge. After dinner, as Jack and I sit in the living room, King's behavior becomes even more pronounced. He positions himself between us and the front door, his body tense, his gaze unwavering. Jack. I whisper, something's really off with King. He's not just being protective, he's scared. Jack, seeing the concern in my eyes, agrees. Maybe we should look into this further. Maybe there's something we're missing. The next day I start to observe King more closely. I notice he reacts not just to sounds or movements, but to specific times of the day. It's as if he's anticipating something, waiting for a moment that hasn't yet arrived. One evening, as the sun sets casting long shadows across our lawn, King's behavior reaches a peak. He barks a sharp, urgent sound and runs to the back door, scratching at it with a fervor I've never seen. I follow him outside, and there in the fading light, I see it, a figure silhouetted against the setting sun, standing at the edge of our property. My heart races, not with fear, but with a sudden, inexplicable recognition. King, now silent, stands beside me, his body rigid, his eyes fixed on the figure. It's then I realize King isn't just sensing danger. His sensing a change, a shift in our lives that's about to unfold. As the figure steps forward, I feel a chill, not from the evening air, but from the realization that whatever King has been trying to tell us, it's about to become clear. The next day, Jack leaves early for an unexpected business trip, leaving me alone with King for the weekend. The house feels empty without Jack's presence, and I find myself spending more time with King, talking to him, playing with him, seeking comfort in his companionship. One afternoon, while I'm lounging in the backyard, King's behavior shifts. He's more insistent, nudging me with his nose, his body language different from his usual playful demeanor. In a moment of vulnerability, seeking some form of connection, I allow King's advances to escalate. What starts as an innocent interaction spirals into something I never anticipated. The realization hits me like a ton of bricks. I've crossed a line, an unimaginable boundary. The guilt and confusion overwhelm me, and I retreat to the house, locking myself in the bathroom, trying to process what has happened. I sit on the cold tile floor, my back against the door, my mind racing with thoughts I can barely comprehend. King's wigs from the other side of the door are like echoes of my own regret. How could I have let this happen? My breath comes in short, sharp gasps as I try to calm myself. The mirror reflective version of me. I hardly recognize, eyes wide with shock, face pale. I splash water on my face, trying to wash away the shame, but it clings to me like a second skin. I think of Jack, his trust in me, our life together, and the love we've built over the years. The thought of him finding out of the hurt it would cause makes my stomach churn. I've betrayed not just him, but myself and the sanctity of our home. King's behavior, which I once found endearing now, feels like a haunting reminder of my lapse in judgment. I remember his loyalty, his unconditional love, and how I've twisted that into something dark and wrong. Hours pass and the sun begins to set, casting long shadows through the small bathroom window. I finally emerge, my legs shaky, my heart heavy. King looks up at me with those big brown eyes, and I feel a pang of sorrow. I avoid his gaze, unable to face the innocence in his eyes. Instead, I busy myself with mundane tasks, cleaning, cooking, anything to distract from the turmoil inside. But every sound, every movement, reminds me of what happened that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house deafening. King, sensing my distress, tries to cuddle close, but I gently push him away. I can't bear his touch, not now, not after what I've done. The next morning I wake up, feeling like I've aged years overnight. The weight of my actions presses down on me, making every movement feel like wading through molasses. I decide to take King for a walk, hoping the fresh air might clear my mind. As we walk, I keep him on a short leash, not trusting myself or him. The neighborhood seems different, the familiar streets now a maze of my own guilt. King's tail doesn't wag with its usual enthusiasm. He senses the change in me. We return home and I sit at the kitchen table, staring at the map from the attic. The dreams of adventure, of a life beyond these walls, now seem trivial compared to the turmoil within. I try to focus on the map, tracing the lines, but my mind keeps drifting back to the backyard, to King, to the moment everything changed. I realize now that my restlessness, my yearning for something more, was not just about exploring new places, but perhaps escaping from myself. The weekend drags on, each hour, stretching into what feels like days. I avoid the backyard, the place where my world tilted. Instead, I spend time in the garden, the one place where I can lose myself in the routine of care, where the growth and decay of plants seem to mirror my own internal struggle. By Sunday evening I'm exhausted, not just physically but emotionally drained. I've replayed the incident over and over each time, feeling more like a stranger to myself when Jack calls to say he'll be home late. Relief washes over me, giving me a few more hours to compose myself. As night falls, I prepare for his return. I clean the house, meticulously trying to erase any signs of my turmoil. King watches me, his head tilted in confusion. I finally sit down, my hands trembling as I wait for the sound of Jack's car. When he finally walks through the door, his face tired but smiling, I feel a rush of emotions, guilt, love, fear, all tangled together. He kisses me and I stiffen, the touch of his lips, a stark contrast to the memory of King's. "How is your trip?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Good. But I missed you. Jack replies, his eyes searching mine for something familiar. I noted, unable to meet his gaze, my mind still wrestling with what I've done. I missed you too. I say the words, feeling hollow. That night, as Jack sleeps beside me, I lay awake, the weight of my secret like a stone in my C*******. T. King, who had been relegated to his bed in the corner, watches me with those knowing eyes. I know I must find a way to cope, to move past this. But the path forward seems obscured by the shadows of my own making. The journey I once dreamed of now feels like an escape from the truth I must face as dawn breaks, casting light into our bedroom. I make a silent vow. I will confront this, not run from it. I will seek forgiveness from Jack, from myself, and perhaps in time from King. But for now I sit with my guilt, knowing that the first step to healing is acknowledging the wound. Days pass and Jack returns, none the wiser. I try to act normal, but every interaction with King now feels tainted. I avoid being alone with him, my guilt manifesting in avoidance. Jack notices my changed behavior but attributes it to stress or fatigue. One evening, while Jack is watching TV, King starts to act out, whining and scratching at the door. Jack, concerned, asks what's wrong with King, and I'm forced to confront the situation. I tell him King might need more exercise, or perhaps he's sick. Jack suggests a vet visit, but I'm terrified of what might be revealed. The next day, I take King to the vet, my heart pounding with every step. Dr. Harris, our vet, examines King, and after a thorough checkup, he says, physically, King is fine, but animals can sense our emotions, Luna. Maybe he's picking up on something you're feeling. I nod, the truth like a stone in my throat. Maybe, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper as we leave the vet's office. I feel a mix of relief and dread. King's behavior isn't due to illness, but what then is it? My guilt, my shame that he senses. Back home, I try to keep busy cleaning, cooking, anything to distract from the turmoil inside. But every time King looks at me with those big brown eyes, I feel a pang of sorrow, a reminder of what happened that night. As Jack and I sit down for dinner, King positions himself between us and the front door, his body tense, his gaze unwavering. Jack, I whisper, something's really off with King. He's not just being protective, he's scared. Jack, seeing the concern in my eyes, agrees. Maybe we should look into this further. Maybe there's something we're missing. The next day, I start to observe King more closely. He reacts not just to sounds or movements, but to specific times of the day. It's as if he's anticipating something, waiting for a moment that hasn't yet arrived. One evening, as the sun sets, casting long shadows across our lawn, King's behavior reaches a peak. He barks a sharp, urgent sound and runs to the back door, scratching at it with a fervor I've never seen. I follow him outside, and there in the fading light I see it. A figure silhouetted against the setting sun, standing at the edge of our property. My heart races, not with fear, but with a sudden inexplicable recognition. King, now silent, stands beside me, his body rigid, his eyes fixed on the figure. It's then I realize King isn't just sensing danger. He's sensing a change, a shift in our lives that's about to unfold. As the figure steps forward, I feel a chill, not from the evening air, but from the realization that whatever King has been trying to tell us, it's about to become clear. The figure approaches, and as the light shifts, I see it's not a stranger, but a familiar face, one that stirs memories of my own past restlessness. It's the traveler Jack had spoken of, the one with tales of distant lands and adventures. Hello, Luna, he says, his voice carrying the weight of journeys untold. I've come to see if you've made your decision. My mind races back to the map in the attic, to the dreams of exploration, and to the moment in the backyard with King. I glance at King, his loyalty now a silent plea for understanding, for forgiveness. What decision? Jack asks, his voice laced with confusion. As he steps out beside me, the traveler looks between us, his eyes knowing the decision, to explore, to live a life less ordinary. I told Jack about the world beyond these walls, and I see you've been contemplating it. Jack's gaze shifts to me, searching for answers. I feel the weight of my secrets, the guilt of my actions, and the longing for something more. Hey, I've been thinking about it. I confess, my voice trembling, but there's so much more at stake. Now the traveler nods, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes the journey we seek isn't just about the places we visit, but the truths we uncover about ourselves. King, sensing the tension, wigs softly, his tail giving a tentative wag. I reach down my hand, hesitating before I stroke his fur, seeking comfort in his presence. Jack wraps an arm around me, his touch grounding. Luna, whatever you decide, we'll face it together. But we need to talk about what's been happening. I nod, knowing that the truth about King's behavior, about my own actions, must come to light. The journey I once dreamed of now feels like an escape from the truth I must face as dawn breaks, casting light into our bedroom. I make a silent vow. I will confront this, not run from it. I will seek forgiveness from Jack, for myself, and perhaps in time from King. But for now I sit with my guilt, knowing that the first step to healing is acknowledging the wound. And so, with a heart full of both fear and anticipation, I begin to plan, not just for a journey that might redefine who we were, but for a journey inward to confront the shadows of my own making. The tension in our home had been building like a storm on the horizon, and now it was about to break. Jack had taken King to the vet himself, something he rarely did, which only added to the weight of the situation. I was a bundle of nerves pacing the house, my mind racing through every possible scenario, every worst-case outcome. When Jack returned, his face was unreadable, a mask that hid whatever news he had. He sat me down on the couch, his eyes heavy with concern. Luna, he began, his voice low and strained. The vet found nothing physically wrong with King, but he suggested that King's behavior might be due to a lack of attention, or perhaps something more troubling. I felt the room tighten around me, the air thick with the unspoken. Jack's gaze was intense, searching mine for answers I wasn't sure I could give. Is there anything you need to tell me, Luna? He asked, his voice a mix of worry and something else, something like suspicion. My heart pounded in my C*******, each beat a drum of guilt and fear, the secret I had been carrying since that afternoon in the backyard. The moment when my world had tilted felt like a stone in my throat. I looked at Jack, his familiar face, now a canvas of confusion and concern. I took a deep breath, the words forming in my mind, each one a step towards a confession that could unravel everything we had built. Jack, I started, my voice barely above a whisper. There's something I need to tell you. It's about King and it's about me. The room seemed to hold its breath. As I continued, when you were away, I was feeling so alone, so restless, and King, he was there, always there. One afternoon I let things go too far. I crossed a line with him. Jack's face went pale, his eyes widening in shock. What do you mean, Luna? His voice was a mix of disbelief and pain. I swallowed hard, the confession tasting bitter on my tongue. I let King get too close, too intimate. It was wrong, and I've been carrying this guilt, this shame. I didn't know how to tell you, how to face you with this. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack stood up, pacing, his hands running through his hair. Luna, how could you, with King, our King? His voice broke, the betrayal evident in every word. I'm so sorry, Jack, I whispered, tears now streaming down my face. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lost in my own thoughts, my own desires for something different, something more. But it was a mistake, a terrible mistake. He stopped pacing, turning to look at me, his eyes searching for the truth, for the woman he married, and King's behavior. It's because of this. I nodded, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. I think he's confused, maybe hurt. He's been acting out, trying to tell us something to protect us, or maybe to warn us. Jack sat back down, his face buried in his hands. This changes everything. Luna, I need time to think, to process this. I know, I said, my voice hollow. I'm so sorry. I will do whatever it takes to make this right, to earn your forgiveness. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. It's not just about forgiveness, Luna. It's about trust, about our life together. How do we move forward from this? The question hung in the air, a chasm between us. I reached out, my hand trembling, but I didn't touch him. I want to try, Jack. I want to find a way back to us, to what we had. I'll talk to someone, seek help, make sure it never happens again. Jack nodded slowly, his gaze distant. We'll need to talk to the vet again. Maybe see a behavior is for King and for us, maybe counseling. We need to heal, not just from this, but from whatever has been missing in our lives. The decision to reveal my secret had been made not out of courage but necessity. The truth was out raw and painful, but it was the first step towards healing, towards understanding as the sunset casting long shadows through our home. I knew that the journey ahead would be one of the hardest we'd ever face, but it was our journey, one we would take together or not at all. The room was heavy with the weight of my confession, the air thick with betrayal and confusion. I watched Jack's face expecting anger, a storm of rage, but instead I saw a profound sadness wash over him. His eyes, usually so warm and inviting, now seemed to look through me, searching for the woman he thought he knew. Without a word he stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. He walked to the door, his back to me, and I heard the soft click of the front door closing behind him. The silence that followed was deafening, void where our life together once thrived. Days turned into weeks, and the house felt like a mausoleum of our past. Jack and I moved around each other like ghosts, our interactions polite but distant. We attended counseling sessions trying to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. The therapist, a kind woman with a gentle voice, guided us through exercises meant to foster understanding and forgiveness. King, our once vibrant German shepherd, seemed to sense the shift in our home. His energy, which used to fill the house with joy, was now subdued. He would lie at the foot of the bed, his eyes following me with a look that seemed to ask for forgiveness, or perhaps for an explanation. His tail no longer wagged with the same enthusiasm, his playfulness replaced by a quiet watchfulness. Our relationship, once so full of laughter and shared dreams, was now a delicate dance of words and silences. We learned to live with the truth, a truth that had altered us irrevocably. Yet in this new reality there was a strange kind of growth. We talked more, not about the mundane details of our day, but about our feelings, our fears, and our desires. One evening, after a particularly intense session with our therapist, Jack and I sat in the garden, the same garden where I once found solace in the soil. The night was cool. The stars above us seemed to listen. As we spoke, Luna, Jack began, his voice softer than I'd heard it in weeks. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about us. I won't lie. It's been hard, harder than anything I've ever faced. I nodded, my heart heavy with the weight of his words. I know, Jack. I've hurt you in ways I never imagined I could. I'm so sorry. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the stars. I've realized something through all this pain. Our life. It was good, but maybe too predictable. Maybe we both needed something to shake us awake. I looked at him, surprised by his insight. You think that's what this was, a wake-up call in a way? Yes, he said, turning to look at me. We've been living in this bubble, and maybe, just maybe, this was life's way of telling us to look beyond it, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability. It was like a balm to my soul. I've been so caught up in my own restlessness, my own desires for adventure, that I lost sight of what we had, what we could still have. I confessed. Jack reached out his hand, finding mine. We can still have that. Luna, we can find a new way to love each other, to understand each other. Life's complexities, they lead us down unexpected paths. But maybe those paths are where we find our true selves. Tears welled up in my eyes, not just from the pain of the past, but from the hope of a future. I want that, Jack. I want to explore not just the world, but us together. He squeezed my hand, a small smile playing on his lips. Then let's do that. Let's find a way back to each other, not to what we were, but to what we can become. King, as if understanding the gravity of our conversation, patted over his head, nudging between us. I stroked his fur, feeling the warmth of his body, a reminder of the love that still existed within these walls. In the weeks that followed, we began to rebuild, not just our relationship, but our lives. We planned small trips, not grand adventures, but moments to reconnect, to rediscover each other. We talked about dreams, not just of travel, but of growth, of becoming better versions of ourselves. Our home, once a symbol of routine, now became a place of healing and new beginnings. King 3 seemed to sense the change. His energy returned, his tail wagging with a cautious optimism. The journey we embarked on was not about escaping our past, but about facing it. Together, we learned that love isn't just about the easy times. It's about navigating the storms, about finding each other in the aftermath. As we sat together one evening watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a peace settle it all over me, Jack's hand in mine, king at our feet. I realized that while our relationship was forever altered, it was not broken. It was evolving, adapting, growing into something new, something resilient. And in that moment I knew that yes, Luna and Jack could find a way back to each other. Not just find a way but forge a new path. One where honesty, forgiveness, and a shared desire for growth would guide us. The journey was ours, and together we would walk it step by step into whatever future awaited us. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks.